us this opportunity. I hope you will see the screen and hear me. Yeah, that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we will give a view from the Netherlands about the resilience in the dairy sector. We have 3 presentations. Abele Kuipers will start to give some policy highlights for the dairy sector in the Netherlands, and then Jelle Zijlstra will give an impression of our first pilot farms and NDA meeting about development strategies, and then I will show some needs coming from the inventory of the survey, but also I will go into some goals from our sector dairy organizations in the Netherlands, and about some networks. So I will start with Abele Kuipers. He will show some background and policy highlights. Abele, can you?
Yeah, we thought that it would be good first to picture a little bit the situation in this region, such that you can better understand how our farmers reacted in the meetings. I think the situation is about like this, that our contribution from our country may be especially interesting or helpful for those of you who work in intensive dairy areas. And we know some of you do. As we visited Italy, I was already surprised that they have almost similar situation as we have. Okay, a little bit about the background in this country. Paul, can you put on that slide, please? I missed the slide now.
Yeah, I go back to the...
We go back to the presentation. Please look together with me, just a little impression about this country. Heavily populated, small. But at the same time, the second agricultural exporter of this world. You know, flowers from Holland. Greenhouse horticulture, dairy, pig meat, eggs. That are our big products to export. We believe, that's our own belief, that what helps our sectors, our agricultural sectors, is that we have, in our opinion, a strong infrastructure. It's a small country, a lot of roads, and we have good working agro companies. Others call it the agro industry, often cooperative. On the other side, we work with certain conditions which make it not easy, like land prices. The prices you see here, between 60 and 70,000, they are from last year, averages. In the region Paul and I sit at the moment, that are the lowlands, prices are often above 100,000 per hectare. Paul, can you find back the presentation?
Yeah. Yeah, you want to go?
After the Second World War, we had a really huge expansion of the animal sectors, especially pigs and poultry. And that caused high environmental pressure, which we realized more in the last decades to deal with. Next one, please. Presently, we have 15,000 dairy farms, on average 100 cows. There is still some tradition. We keep family farms, often with one member working. We are based on grassland, very fertile soils. Even the sandy soils, which were poor, of course, because of fertilizer, they have become very useful. And we focus on efficiency, low cost. We specialized dairy, for instance, and we like techniques. I think you know, most of you. Then we go to more recently, the animal sectors contribute pretty heavily to our MPC amounts. Phosphate I come back to, the P, but if you look at ammonia, our society tells us that the animal sectors contribute 44% of the ammonia in this country. You can understand how the community looks at that. Methane, we produce about 13.5 tons. More important is 75% comes from the dairy sector. Yeah, Paul? We put a few pictures together, actually I did it, and this is always just to pick some things we like. Well, on the top you see some housing systems. The simple reason is that the people who sit here and present now in this room, they are, and that is our country, pretty active lately in innovative housing systems. And we think we can improve. So you see some pictures. On the bottom, you see our attention for grassland, grazing, and that is increasing attention. I come back to that. But what we like most is techniques. I show you on the left, there is a manure, a slurry injector. Paul, can you indicate the injector? It was developed on our experimental station here. The idea came from one researcher. So we are still proud of it, and it is obligatory in our country. Then we go to the milk robot. The first prototype was on our experimental station here, where Paul and I am sitting. And it developed. The first prototype actually did not succeed, but the second and third one did. And then go to the present. That is the cow toilet on our experimental farm at the moment, and it is a topic where also we work on. And but the idea came actually from a company, but it is on our station. And then I go to the middle, and that's completely new. You see there a picture in the middle. The dairy sector in our country has always been popular. It was liked. But the last years, dairy farmers and others start protesting. So it was a protest meeting in the last 2 years. Completely new phenomenon. We hardly know how to deal with it. Next one, please, Paul. Which policies we have, which also raise so many emotions in some ways. We went, just as you, from the milk quota. But differently from you, we went immediately to a phosphate quota per farm. And that's really not much different from a milk quota. The phosphate quota have market value, as the milk quota had. Our dairy sector became regulated and land tight. So we want the dairy sector to be land oriented. Pig and poultry sector not. So that's a huge diversion in our country. We see also now a gradual extensification of the dairy sector, which is really remarkable. Some elements, there is a policy that we want more than 82% of the herds to graze. And actually at the moment it is 84%. If we do not achieve that goal, grazing becomes obligatory. That has been the policy intention. And that is recently, we want more than 65% of protein from own land. Then I go to the big topic, the huge topic, ammonia. Has to do with nature areas. I don't think we really realized it, but it comes from the juridical courts. Groups in our country check if we keep in our country the rules, if we follow correctly the rules. And the rule is nitrogen deposition on nature areas should be in our country less than 0.7 gram per hectare. And that is a rule established by models in our country. And they want to keep that. And the juridical courts, action groups go to the juridical court, and then we didn't manage. Interesting is to see that other countries have different levels. For instance, in Germany, the rule is less than 100 grams per hectare. So you can understand that gives some discussion here. But anyway, Paul, can we go on? We have here 133 nature areas in our country, 40% of the total land surface. I don't know if you imagine the Netherlands as a nature area, but we have plenty little areas. Recently, the policy is that 25 kilometers around those areas should be as much as possible free from agriculture, or we should realize really regulated emission power agriculture. And on top of this, very interesting, I think, to tell you, in January this year, our new government appointed a ministry and a minister of nitrogen, just nitrogen. And even yesterday, the minister was again in our main paper. Paul, you have to show that differently. Can you see Paul, his picture? No, you can't, eh?
I think
Yes,
so.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our sector, dairy sector, is now almost each 1.5 days in the main papers because of nitrogen, of course also climate change. And this is our new minister who has to take care of the nitrogen. Actually, she has one of the biggest budgets in the government. So I think it's a nice job to do. No, it's very difficult. Okay, Paul. Oh yeah, a little bit more. There is land hunger in our country. The goal is to build 1 million new houses in the next few years. We have, of course, industry needs land. We need sun parks, windmills, etc., etc. Just here in our area, the lowlands, just 4 farms, big farms, 80 hectares each, almost 100, 4 farms are sold out, and Facebook will build a data center. So it is just very close to where we are working now. Climate change, the government has said we want to be on top of Europe. Well, you can understand what that means for the dairy sector. Goals are not yet exactly clear, but that will be also a huge topic to come. The slogan we hear a lot in the papers and in the policies, agriculture will be transformed, realize a circular agriculture. And then last of all, and that's the less pleasant thing, all the others are challenges which we solve, but our public has become much more critical lately, also towards the dairy sector. And that has everything to do with environment and with the juridical procedures around it, which hurt our society. This is a bit the environment where Jelle will present how farmers discuss dairy farming under these circumstances.
Yeah, Able.
Jelle?
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Jelle, you are ready for your presentation?
I'm all ready for it. Yes, for sure. Please show the next slide.
Yeah. I don't see you, Jelle, but please say if I have to go to the
I
next.
should be visible, but maybe Jeff can comment on that, whether I am.
Yeah, we see you. Yeah,
Okay, yes, thank you very much. In the Netherlands, they all know me, so that's not so important to see me, but I'm glad that it works in Teams. Once again, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this presentation. This is the second one after the introduction of Able about the structure of our dairy sector and items that are at stake right now in the dairy sector. I'd like to present you the results of the resilience meeting of our National Dairy ACES group we had in November. And this was an ACES group where we met with 11 Dutch dairy farmers and 4 advisors. 2 of the advisors were vets. One was from the accountancy sector and another was one was from University of Applied Sciences. And I like to present the results. This is the way that we met. It was in the COVID time, so we kept distances between all the participants, 1.5 meters. But that was easy to do, so not really a challenge, but we managed to do it. And this was in November in the central room. Please let me have the next slide. This is the content I like to share with you. First, to talk about the goals of our meeting and the approach that we had during the meeting, the program, the results. I like to share some results and I like to discuss and introduce some possible potential next steps. Our goals with this meeting were, first of all, to better understand how farmers interpret resilience. So what do farmers think about when we talk about resilience? The second goal was to make an inventory of the expected major changes. So what's going to happen in the Dutch dairy sector? What are the major changes that Dutch dairy farmers are facing? And the third program item was how to increase the ability of dairy farmers to cope with these changes. And not only the dairy farmers, also the setup of the farms and even the whole dairy chain. So how can a dairy chain increase its resilience, the ability to cope with challenging changes? This was the program. First of all, what does resilience mean to you? Second, what are the big major changes? And major changes we defined as big, complicated and long-lasting changes that we foresee. Sometimes we also call it shocks and stresses, but in this case, in the discussions with the farmers, we called it major changes. Changes that are foreseen, will be big changes for the farmers, not just a small change like changing your ration. No, it's changing the environment of the farm, it's changing the requirements set on the farm, it's changing in politics, like Abele mentioned. I mean, Abele explained actually most of these long-lasting major changes that have to do with sustainability, politics, the attitude of citizens towards agriculture. That's number 2. The third item in the program was how important is it to increase resilience on the farm, of the farmer and of the farm for these major changes. And if we conclude that it is important to increase resilience so you can better stand all these large changes, then the next question, of course, is how to adapt, to incorporate in your strategy, maybe in your personal skills, how to incorporate skills that are needed to adapt to these major changes. And in the end, I have some short discussion about follow-up activities. And I have to mention that this is all part, of course, of the Resilience for Dairy project. I expect that this is about the same that we do in our country, what will be done in other countries where Resilience for Dairy is active as well. So we try to understand resilience, what does it mean? What are the farmers thinking about resilience and how to improve resilience on farms? That's the goal. Next slide, please. So here come the results. First, our first question to farmers, what are you thinking about when we talk about resilience? Because for us in the Netherlands, we use a completely different word. And resilience can have many faces, actually, for many people. And these were the answers of the farmers. These were the items they were thinking about. Quite often they were talking about adaptation, adaptability to cope with changes. That was the most frequent used word. The second one was to the recovering capacity, a little bit familiar to the third one, robust. And the fourth one is flexible. So if we take the top 4, you can see that, first of all, I think the basic of being resilient is to have a robust farm and to be able to easily deal with shocks that will happen to you without any change, without hardly any change on the farm. So you like to have a robust farm that can stand a high milk price, a low milk price, that could even stand the big change in politics and so on. Of course, that's the first requirement, I think you can call it. The second one is, of course, if things are changing and you are not robust enough to deal with these changes, then of course the question is, how can you adapt? Are you flexible to adapt? So I think in this whole feedback of the farmers, these are two important themes: being robust and being flexible to adapt. And then on number 5, it goes about anticipation. So understand what will happen in the future. Has to do with being robust. Being stress resistant. Stress resistant can be applied on a personal level and also on the farm level.
Yeah.
And for sure, on a personal level, this is also an important item. I mean, if you are facing many changes in politics and are wondering whether your farm will stand all these changes and whether your farm will survive all these changes, I hope you are a little bit stress resistant, that you will not immediately become completely stressful. Other similar terms they have used is good revenue model and tipping point. Tipping point means I can stand changes until a certain point, and then I have to change my, let's say, my farm system or my revenue model. Well, this is what's all about, the resilient dairy farmer, weathering the challenges of life and the land. Here it also shows the personal challenges, personal skills, and of course the land. The land and the animals are two important factors on the farm. Then we tried to get an impression of the importance of these major changes on farm level. How important are these changes if it comes to resilience?
Mm-hmm.
And next step is adaptations, and we scored it by using Mentimeter. So that's an app on a mobile phone. So all the farms in the meeting use their mobile phone to score all the items. We first had a brainstorm where we brainstormed about what are major changes. After that, brainstormed about adaptations, and brainstorms were scored. All major changes and all these adaptations were scored by using this mobile phone Mentimeter. Very efficient way. I can recommend it to anybody who would like to have this kind of session. By the way, if you want the program of our session, it's already shared with many people within the Resilience for Dairy, but please feel free to send me an email and I will send you the program that we have used, including the results, the more extensive result. So this is the way we scored. And here are the results of the scoring. I only show here the highest scoring major changes and the importance that the farmers have connected to this to these major changes. And they could score from 1 to 5. 1 means less important and 5 means very important. And here are the highest scoring items. And I have clustered the higher scoring items a little bit in main themes. And here you see the main themes: sustainability, circular agriculture, entrepreneurship, policy in the Netherlands, European policy, economy and costs, and market and society. And these are the key themes that have the highest scores if it comes to being very important as a major change. So will have a lot of impact. Please mute the microphone, Paul and Abela. That would be nice. Yes, thank you. The average score gives us a message about how important the farmers think that it is to adapt to these major changes. So to be resilient for these changes. And on top of it, it is sustainability. What do we mean by sustainability? It's about environment, soil fertility, greenhouse gases, animal welfare, all seen as big impact factors for the future. Circular agriculture, our Minister of Agriculture has proposed kind of a new agricultural policy about 4 years ago. It was actually the former minister, but it's still very very valid in our parliament that they really like to emphasize circular agriculture. So that's also a big challenge for the farmers to respond to that need for circular agriculture. Number 3 in the key themes is entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship here are some aspects given from entrepreneurship about milk price and trying to achieve a bonus price on your milk. Bonus price in the Netherlands is very much connected to delivering milk that is produced more sustainable. Quite a few companies have bonuses for more sustainable milk, whether it's about animal welfare or grazing or greenhouse gases. You can deserve either bonus prize or some kind of a scoring system that will in the end result in a bonus prize. Also a part of entrepreneurship is farm succession, also seen as a big item. Policy in the Netherlands is the next major change. I think policy is very much connected to sustainability themes and circular agriculture that are shown above, but they are also mentioned in more general terms. Farmers have the feeling that government policy is quite inconsistent. And this is of course what's happening because government will change every once in a while and they will have different emphases within their new political strategy. So for the farmers, this is a kind of confusing, hard to build your strategy on. So farmers don't like it, these inconsistencies in policies. And environmental permits, the same. Environmental permits are changing, environmental permits are brought to court, like Abel mentioned, and given a lot of headaches to farmers. Land rent laws also, what is allowed to rent land and all kind of regulations have to do with this. EU policies, common agricultural policy, a lot of discussion. Some farmers want them to be focused more on sustainability. Other farmers just don't like that. They prefer to get their money with little additional efforts. So they will kind of complain, we have to do much more all the time and receive less money from the EU. And they are concerned about the farm to fork policy. Well, economy cost increases. Right now, of course, the dairy sector is really facing cost increases, combined with a very high milk price, by the way. But this is a concern, of course, all the time. This wasn't one that was not surprised that they come up with this concern. And dairy cooperatives seem to become less dominant. We have private competitors for the dairy sector nowadays in the Netherlands, and that's quite a tough competition. And it's hard for the dairy cooperatives to adapt their strategy to new circumstances like sustainability, new circumstances where many of the members of the cooperative do not share common opinions about the future of the cooperative. So that's hard to deal with for the cooperative. They kind of have to diversify by themselves. And that's a hard way to work. It's hard for them to work that way. So we are observing now that the cooperatives are kind of losing market and try to reorganize themselves. So these were the major changes that farmers are facing. And then the question is how to adapt, or is it important to adapt to that? Well, that was in fact expressed by the scores that we saw in the last sheet. Here we have the adaptations, because the next question, of course, if farmers consider a certain major change is very important, and the next question will be how to respond to that. How to adapt yourself, the farm, the dairy chain, to increase resilience of farmers, the farm, and the chain. Well, here we made a brainstorm of all kinds of adaptations to increase resilience. And here again, in these results, we share with you the adaptations that score highest. So these are the highest scores, also clustered in groups again. So the highest group is scores is, so let's say the key theme in adapting to increase resilience is develop a good revenue model for the farm. So this is a challenge now for the farmers. Now that so many things are changing, what does it mean for the revenue model of your farm? We can do it in a more classic way. Create margins, of course, to try to improve the difference between your costs and your revenues. That's an ongoing story, all for many decades. But the second thing, and that's actually more new, to improve the valorization of milk and meat. Can you connect to market concepts that pay a higher milk price or that pay a higher meat price? And can you produce in a way that deserves these higher prices? And can you find a chain where you can bring these higher values to reality? And the third item that they mentioned, talking about a revenue model, is create money for adaptations. In case you have to change your strategy, you have to change the farm. Of course, you need funds, you need finance. The second key item is identify opportunities and seize them. So it seems like there are a lot of threats coming to the dairy farmers. This is also the reason for many dairy farmers to step on the tractor and to come to the capital and protest with lots of tractors. So that's their response to stress and to threats. The other response could be, okay, now that this is happening, what are the opportunities for me and for my farm? So that's, I think right now in the Netherlands, this is a very important way to adapt to the future. Identify what are the opportunities that all these threats are actually offering us. Can you identify them? Can you still see opportunities, or are you blinded by the stress? So try to be aware of opportunities and threats and try to translate threats to opportunities. And I was kind of surprised that the farmers in our group came up with this item, identify opportunities, as the second item. And I think this was not an average group. It was a group that is a little bit more future oriented, more innovation oriented. The third key item is to make a business plan. Of course, once when you have discovered these are the opportunities that are in the future for me, try to make a plan out of it. Next to talking about the farm and business plans, you can also talk about the person, your personal development. Do you know your strengths and weaknesses? And do you know how to improve your knowledge, how to gain knowledge? And this is also, let's say this is number 4 if it comes to the key themes. Know what you can, what your ability is to adapt. And then of course it comes to adapting the farm, act. Prepare soil for the future. Soil was meant especially. And then we had another group of adaptations that are combined here and exploit your social environment. It scored a little bit less high. The highest one within that group was about communication, collaboration, and connecting. So communicate to other partners in the chain, to your neighbors, to your environment, collaborate with them, and connect to successful initiatives going on somewhere in the dairy sector or in the dairy chain. So really use your communication skills and your social skills. That's the result of the adaptation. So the farmers, I think, were very friendly in coming up with all kinds of adaptations. Next slide, please. Here are conclusions actually from the last slide. Develop your own revenue model. So instead of sitting down and complaining and getting afraid of the future, please raise your head and try to develop your model based on opportunities that you see and make a model for the long term. Number 3. So seizing opportunities, grabbing opportunities, facing opportunities, know your opportunities is a very important element because it will be very hard to discover opportunities once when you are blinded by the threats. And I think that's a big change and an important skill to develop. Personal development and skills. Number 4, adapt the farm. So if it comes to once when you have made up your mind about the future and your plans, then it comes to action on the farm. And the main action items mentioned by our farmers are sustainability, soil, and circularity. And as the last one, collaborate with business partners and environment, because they can be your partners in winning in the future. Next slide, please. Yes, of course, the next question that we have not really answered during that meeting. Please go one slide back once again. The next question, after having seen these conclusions, is what tools and best practices are already available to achieve this? Because we have not gone into very concrete tools and practices. And of course, that's the real next question, to add best practices and more concrete tools to all these 6 items. Next slide, please. Well, just some next steps, discussion also afterwards, after having experienced this meeting with the Dutch farmers and advisors. First of all, of course, I am really wondering what the results are from other partner countries that have done the same kind of meeting. That would be very interesting to compare the results of the different countries, because I expect that the climate for dairy farming in different countries may be different. So it would be nice to see what are the concerns, what are the major changes, and how do the farmers expect how to adapt and how to improve their resilience towards these major changes. And the next step, so first of all, share with partners within the project and being curious about what they have. The second step will be to improve skills of farmers and advisors to improve resilience on the farm. How can we do it? Well, first, again, we can look for tools that are available to cope with needed adaptations. We can look for experiences farmers in other countries or farmers in our own country have, especially with these topics, sustainability, soil, and circularity. And of course, within our project, we have made a survey in Work Package 2, a survey of all kind of solutions that are now scored by farmers. And it would be very interesting to compare the results of this survey also with the results of our first Dairy Acres meeting. So curious about results in other countries and trying to make steps forward to develop and share models, experiences, tools, solutions to improve resilience on dairy farms. Then the last picture, please. This is what we are talking about, the resilient dairy farmer. And the resilient dairy farmer will be not an easy way to the top. Every farmer can tell you, this is nothing new. If you want to reach the top, you will face thunderstorms, storms, a lot of rain, muddy soils, and hope in the end that you will reach the top. And the way to the top will be easier if you are a more resilient person, if your farm is a little bit prepared, and if you know how to be flexible and how to adapt. That's the message still so far from the Dutch group. Thank you very much. And the floor is to Paul.
I have to unmute. Jelle, thank you very much. I don't know if there are any questions at this moment. Yeah, I think I go on, and at the end we can have questions. Okay. Wait a minute.
Dan kom je zelf niet van de beurt.
No. Ja. God, wait a minute. I have to. Yeah, I will go into the needs and also how our dairy organizations are thinking about the future, about resilience. Yeah, this was the same group. Jelle already explained the results of the meeting. I have also visited the 8 pilot farms and asked them about strategies, especially focusing on the environment. So I will go into that. First, I will show about the goals and the strategies of some Dutch dairy organizations. The Dutch dairy organization, that means the milk suppliers, the feed companies, the young farmers organizations, the nature-based organizations. So a lot of organizations are involved. Then I will show the needs from the survey that Alberto yesterday showed some results. I will focus on the Netherlands. And then I will show the strategies from the farmers who are involved in the Resilience for Dairy group, but also in the Climate Care cattle farming group. And that's more focusing on environmental issues. And then at the end, about the next steps. No, I go too fast. Let me see. I hope you still see this.
Yes, we can see the presentation.
Yeah, because I missed. Okay. Sorry, I will. These are the goals which has been set by the Dutch dairy chain. On the left, you see the teams until 2020, and on the right, you see that they added some new teams. On the left, they will update the goals, and they are about climate neutral dairy farming, about animal welfare. So that's animal welfare is about antibiotic use, longevity of the cows, but also the rearing of young stock. We have about more than 80% of the cows are grazed, and we want to maintain that. And also biodiversity is important. And that means they are developing a monitor. And if you, and like Jelle told, the dairy processors can give a bonus when you graze more or when you do more for biodiversity. We also have a low footprint milk. The new teams are about new business models. So there is discussion about who is taking which roles and responsibilities, and discussion with the government about the climate agreement. Land-based is important, so that means that you need more land close to your farm, and safety of the yard is a new issue. There are some management goals which has been set up by the dairy organizations. Like I said, especially the feed companies, the milk suppliers, but also the young farmers group, together with the Ministry of Agriculture. They have set 3 management goals to reduce the nitrogen losses. And the first one is dilution of slurry during application. That means about 2 times slurry and 1 time water. More grazing, and grazing means more than 180 hours per year. And to lower the protein in the ration. In 2024, the average crude protein per kilogram dry matter for the dairy cows in the young stock, so on herd level, should be 160. And at this moment, it's between 165 and 170. And we also have a pilot group who goes even lower than 160 to 155. And the other thing is to stimulate land-based farming and low emission barns. There's a lot of research going on low emissions barns. These are the results of the survey from Alberto. If you look at the bottom, soil care, that's the highest score. So soil care is really an issue at our pilot farms. It's also related to the housing system, because some have a free walk housing system where they compost the wood chips with the manure, and that gives also manure with more organic matter. Communication to the general public is a big one. So I start at the bottom. Energy, renewable sources. We have some pilot farms who have a lot of them have solar panels on their roof. Some of them have the free walk housing system, a very animal-friendly housing system with wood chips, and we even have one pilot farm with an artificial floor which separates the urine in the faces. And that has already been implemented in other countries, especially Slovenia. I hope Maria is there and she will recognize that. And then salary returns, animal welfare, flexibility, innovative milk devices. That means milk robots are important. And easy access to credit, work-life balance. That's also what we discussed yesterday.
Oh, Valerie will like that. Huh?
Valerie will like that, yeah. So it's obvious, soil care we have to remember. So this is the results from the survey.
Boven de 4.
Yeah, more than a score of 4. Then I just want to mention some networks who are going on in the Netherlands. We have a network of about 18 farmers who implement strategies to reduce greenhouse gases and ammonia emission. At these farms, a lot of measurements are done on emissions in the barn, also to follow the feeding strategy of those farms. So it's demonstration, but it's also research. Another group of farmers, which is just started, that's a pilot with 150 farmers and 45 advisors from feed companies, but also independent advisors, to reduce the protein to 155. So for the whole sector, the goal is 160, and for this group it is 155. It just started. I'm the project leader of it, and we are looking for to learn from this group why is it possible and why is it not possible. So the groups, we have groups, 3 groups depending on the soil, clay ground, sand and peat ground, and also the intensity. We have other regional pilots in the Netherlands which are focusing on to reduce the use of fertilizer, and some groups focusing on nature-based dairy farming. And another group, which is a very old group, I think maybe 40 years or something, that's a study group of 100 farmers. It are the big farmers in the Netherlands. They call them Tomorrow, and they are all. I'm in the advisory board of that study group, and we always have discussions about strategies for the future. And the last one, that's an international group, that's the Climate Care Cattle Farming. And the groups from the Netherlands are the same pilot farms in Resilience for Dairy. Yeah, that's an European project, an ERANET project. And those farmers, 8 farmers in the Netherlands, I asked them, what are your strategies to reduce ammonia emission, methane emission, and some other strategies? So to reduce ammonia emission, some of them are already doing it or have plans to do it about separation of slurry. We already mentioned the cow toilet, but there are also floor types to separate it. One is thinking about cleaning the air. Dilution of slurry is important. Other techniques to apply the slurry on the field. More fresh grass, so less, to feed more fresh grass. And in general, feeding is important, so less crude protein in your ration. To reduce ammonia emission, we already see that a lot of them have solar panels, and they are interested in biogas. But they like low input systems, so use less fertilizer, less concentrates. One is even growing their own concentrates. Sugar beets is getting more popular in the Netherlands. Maize rotation, So not continuously growing maize, but in rotation with grassland, more grassland. And we have one innovative farmer who is burning methane. So he is getting the methane from his manure storage, and that methane will be burned. So you change it methane into CO2. Some other issues where they mention is other housing systems like free walk housing. That was another European project which has been finished this year, which gave a lot of information about welfare, especially welfare. A lot of farmers in the Netherlands keep less young stock based on the FOSFA quotum system, but less young stock also helps to reduce ammonia and methane emission. One is selling A2 milk. So that has a big impact on his farm because he has to select the cows which have the genetics for A2 milk. He is also thinking about selling his compost, and that is the wood chips composted with the manure. He wants to sell it instead of paying money to get rid of your manure. A lot of farmers are also thinking about what we call herb-rich grassland. Grassland with a lot of herbs in it. Soil quality is already mentioned, is important with those farmers. And what was surprising for me that a lot of those farmers, the pilot farmers, are saying we want to be self-supporting for energy, food, feed, water. So they want to be independent from advice of industry. That was also an amazing answer. So the next steps is we already had a first meeting from the pilot farms and the NDA members. We want in the next meeting, I think we put them together in one meeting, and we have NDM members from the feed company, veterinarian person, one from education, one advisor, and I think we will try to get some more people from more advisors and other companies. And in the second meeting, we will discuss the results of the first meeting, which Jelle showed. We will show the needs from the survey, prioritize them, and then we have to focus on to discuss the solutions and prioritize them. And solutions will be about social and economics, tools to improve skills, like Jelle said, new business models. A nice example is that, for example, how do you get paid if you reduce your greenhouse gases? We have one farmer in the Netherlands who is lowering his water level on peat ground. Putting the water level higher, so that reduces the greenhouse gases in peat ground, and he gets carbon credits for that. That's the first farmer in the Netherlands who get carbon credits by increasing the water level in peat ground. That's a nice example, and a lot of farmers are looking for how can they get paid for more eco services. And of course, solutions can be technical about animals, land issues. A lot of examples are in the survey. And after that, we have to describe the solutions. That was, I think, my last. Yeah, that was my last slide. So that was a long presentation from 3 persons. I hope there are some questions. Jeff, I could not see the people in the. No, I can see you. I see some hands. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul, Jelle, and Abel. There are a few precision questions in the chat. Maybe you can give an answer to this. First, the 180 hours of grazing, is it per year? You wrote, because this seems not a lot. And then there was the question, nature-based. Is this organic?
Grazing, 180 hours is not a lot. It's maybe between 10 and 50% of the whole time a cow is spending a year. So the grazing period in the Netherlands is mostly about 6 months, and most of the farmers are grazing a part of the day. So
Well, 180 days, not 180 hours, probably.
Excuse me, indeed, it is 180 days and 6 hours a day. That's the...
Yeah. Oh, yeah, this was right.
Yes.
You're right. No, the total on yearly basis is 720. Sorry, yeah, that's a mistake.
That was a good question.
Yeah, a good question. That's very low on it. No, sorry.
Just to check if we are following.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who raised that question?
Well, it was Mr. Bonen.
Yeah.
Oh, that Mr. Bonen, he knows.
I know him very well.
Now our
It's by far.
milk suppliers, they pay around 2 cents more if you have 720 hours more. If you have 720 hours grazing per year. And the next question is, how do you check that? That's also a discussion in the Netherlands. How do you know they really graze 720 hours? Yeah. And the next question was about the nature-based farming groups. I know that Jelle is guiding that group. It's not all of them are not always organic. It's also non-organic farmers, but maybe Jelle, you can add something to that because you are.
Yes, the wording we use in the Netherlands is nature inclusive agriculture. It's not going that far as agroecology does in France, for instance, but it means that farmers pay more attention to natural processes on the farm, especially in the soil. They give more attention to conservation of nature. And a little bit more emphasis on circular farming. It's a kind of, it's not really an alternative for organic farming. It comes close to organic farming, but it is still a phenomenon that has to be investigated and implemented further. It's not really a defined system. It's just a movement towards nature inclusive agriculture.
Yeah, I see a question from Joseline about are these networks connected to the resilience of farmers, pilot farmers. I selected 8 pilot farmers at this moment, and those 8 farmers are also involved in the European CCC farming project. And some of them also were involved in the Free Walk project. But I think we try to also to get contact with the other study groups. And, like the study club tomorrow, like the group who is reducing ammonia, and so we try to make connections, but that has not been done yet.
Okay, but it means that it would be a good resources also to discuss with them on this other project. So that's nice. Thanks.
Yeah. Some questions are in French. That's more difficult. Castellan Elizabeth, what's the question? It's in French.
Sorry, we had a discussion about one of your proposition, one of your farmers who was burning the CH4 into CO2, and we had a discussion about the reason, because the warming coefficient is lower, but the CO2 will last longer in the atmosphere. So we asked our expert, Elizabeth.
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Strengths and weaknesses of doing such an operation.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because if you change methane into CO2, it has less impact on the environment, we think, because methane has 25 times more impact than CO2. That was the reason. But burning is one thing. If you burn it, the next step should be, can we use the energy by burning? And this is one of the research which is going on. Other research is about can we filter the methane in the soil? And that's a feasibility study going on, and some small experiments. So instead of burning, you could also use the field or the soil to absorb and let bacteria do the work, and so that could also be a way to reduce methane emission.
We have a farmer who is managing to lead the air from the manure storage. He leads it to the drainage pipes under his land and hopes that ammonia and methane will be absorbed in the soil filter. So that farmer leads air into his land. And we think it is pretty interesting idea, and we should look further into it. So that are all kind of developments going on.
Yeah, so methane is a big issue, and there's research being done about methane blockers, about manure management, about breeding issues.
Safety in the yard is een mooie.
Ja,
safety, dat is wel een leuke.
Ja.
Well, Maria, safety in the yard has also immediately to do with, in some way, also with environment, but it is more general meant. But lately we have somewhat regularly problems with explosions of manure storages, the storage pits where we collect the air. You have a manure storage. They are covered in our country. You have a cover, a roof, and the air in there or below the slatted floor. If the slatted floor in the barn is pretty closed, we try to have a more or less closed floor for the cows. Below that, the gases accumulate, and it happens that they explode. And also very recently we had a big explosion on a farm. But of course there is more safety on the farm.
Yeah, it's explosion, but also the traffic on your yard, tractors and young children,
and also those gases, and that has happened once in a while. If a farmer goes into the storage for some reason to repair the storage, the gases are it's like poison. So we had really very serious accidents with farmers who went into the storage. So that's a whole issue in itself. I think that's a long answer for our Slovenian colleague who imported our artificial floor.
Yeah, I think Valerie is still calculating the amount of grazing hours.
Just
Valerie,
checking.
you are right. 120, yeah.
You know, women and figures.
Yeah.
Okay. But you're right, 120 days, 6 hours per day is 720. That's what it is at this moment. And the Dutch dairy chain wants to increase that.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
For environmental reasons. Huh?
Yeah, grazing. It's not only grazing because for the image, for the landscape, but it's also, it reduces the ammonia emission.
Yeah.
That's also an important reason to have more grazing.
Kun je uitleggen waarom?
Well,
dus die urine valt in de grond. Hè?
Yeah, but well, there are other questions. I will see. Maria, you talk about bonus milk price. Bonus in sustainable offering. Out with. Okay. Maria, Maria, you want to explain your question?
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah, my question is when you talk about bonus milk price, and this bonus milk price came from dairy industry or even from supermarkets. And with bonus milk price, industry offer farmers 1 or 2 or 3 cent higher milk price.
Yeah.
And my question is how we can provide farmers on the long term that this bonus price will stay. Because in our country, farmers say, yeah, industry always ask for something additional, but then in 2 years became standard. For example, animal welfare. The industry first promise higher milk price, but then after 2 or 3 years say, no, this has to be standard. And then milk price is again lower and lower.
Well, yeah, at this moment, you still get a higher milk price if you graze the cows. And we have the low footprint milk. That's for some farmers can do with that. But maybe Jelle, you also have focused on that issue, isn't it?
Yes,
We have
yes.
different certificates for milk products.
Now, in many dairy processors, often combined with supermarkets, are starting dairy chain initiatives to produce more sustainable milk and to get paid extra. The Friesland Campina has a certification called Planet Proof milk. So farmers have to fulfill standards on many items: greenhouse gases, nature conservation, nitrogen. So about 6 indicators account for this case, and then you can get a higher milk price of a premium of 2 cents. Then there is a private processors together with the largest supermarket in the Netherlands, Albert Heijn. They have their own certification system, and farmers get a price paid of €5. And so almost every dairy processor now has some kind of a system where you get higher milk price for more sustainable milk, and they use their own certification systems. Of course, it's hard to control because you need information from the farm. So the more data you have from the farms, the better this can function. And the phenomenon of a few years later, it will be standard. Of course, this is what's happening in life. So if you want to connect to these kind of systems, if you want to participate in it, you might as well take into account that in the future, the standards will be raised. And of course, that's not different from producing cars or producing bikes. The standards of your customers will be raised all the time. So you better try to connect to the system and try to find out, okay, what will be the next in order to maintain my higher milk price. That's and maybe a new phenomenon for many in the market, but that's what you experience when you operate in the market.
Yeah. So you agree with Maria, eh? The standard can be higher.
Yes.
Yeah, Maria, we had a few years ago actually a very interesting discussion here. The government was for some time thinking to make grazing obligatory. And of course that gave a big discussion because, a lot of farmers would resist that, and then the farmers organizations discussed with the government, please don't do that, because then there is no variation anymore, then we cannot stimulate it anymore. Please give us the time to stimulate it, we give a bonus, but if it is obligatory, there is no stimulation anymore. And then they made the agreement that the farmers' organization should take care that at least 82% of the herds are grazing. And Paul just told that will go up in the near future, and that will increase. So it's an interesting question.
Yeah.
How to deal with it in a good way.
But the standard milk price is high at this moment in our country, but the cost price is also high. Fuel prices, fertilizer prices, feeding prices are going up, but also the milk price is going up. So that's an interesting development. So yeah, I think we had all the questions, and we also get some remarks from other countries that safety of the yard is a big issue in other countries. I see in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeff,
If you permit,
yeah.
I would just ask a last question. Jelle was talking about, I saw that mostly all farmers, or it was an important thing to adapt the revenue model. And we were just talking now that the dairy industry is trying always to give something more, but it is being the standard in future. Yeah. Do your farmers see that the costs of all the sustainability measures we have to take, that they can be covered just by this milk price? Because we had exactly the same discussion here, that the costs for reducing ammonia, methane are really high. It needs a really high surplus in the price. So I just want to know what was your discussion.
Well, if you can. Yeah, you want to say something? Yeah, me too.
Yeah, well, if you ask this question, because this of course is the question that's going on all the time, this question of Jeff, if you ask it to an average farmer in the Netherlands, he will say, no, they don't pay enough. My costs to produce in a more sustainable way are higher than the bonus in the milk price. That's the average answer of dairy farmers. But there are quite a few smart dairy farmers and smart dairy processors and smart supermarkets who come up with new concepts, and they're looking for farmers who want to join, and they form a group, whether it's a group of 2 or 5 or 100 farmers. They build new groups, they negotiate about what farmers can add in the field of sustainability. They make agreements about the milk price paid, and there we go. And now we see a lot more initiatives this way. And this brings me to the point of the individual responsibility of a dairy farmer to make his own business model. You cannot just stick to the idea of, okay, they will not pay enough, so I don't get involved. No, you have to find out what are your opportunities, with which partners in the dairy chain can you connect to come up to a new dairy market concept that pays enough to justify all the adaptations you do in the farm. So this is about collaborating between the market and the farmer, not just sit down and complain about milk prices that are too low, but come into action and develop your own new initiative that we call a new business model. I think that's the challenge for the future, instead of thinking about, okay, it's not enough. If it's not enough, of course, you should not join this kind of initiatives, but you might as well have to think about, how can we make it possible on our farm? How can we come to a match where it's interesting for me to produce more sustainable milk and be more appreciated in society in general? I think that's the big challenge for the modern dairy farmers, especially in our country. But I expect that it's not that much different in France or Belgium, Germany.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Maybe I can add something, because if you have a more efficient fertilizing and feeding system, you might also lower your costs. And I mentioned 3 management strategies from our dairy sectors and the government, like more grazing could be profitable, less crude protein in your diet could be profitable, and also dilution of a slurry is not the most expensive solution. The most expensive one are if you have to invest in other housing systems. Yeah. That's an expensive one, and that's also where we have a lot of discussion about. Yeah. But new revenue models, that was one of the biggest issue in our first meeting. Jeff, is that answering your question?
Yeah, it's okay. It is everywhere the same discussion, like Jelle says. And I think it was a lot, what you proposed was a lot about personal development of farmers. And I don't know, maybe we have to really look in this project for solutions in that way, how you can train farmers, how you can confide them, that they have confidence in doing what they do. It's not a lot about technical solutions.
Yeah,
I agree. This is my humble opinion that the major factor in making farms more resilient is making the farmers more resilient. And they're, of course, not only the farmers, also the other people who are working in a farm, make them more resilient and make them more open-minded towards market and society. I think that's the biggest challenge that we face in the Netherlands right now. And that will determine whether you survive in the next 20 years or not. This is just my humble statement. Please, Abel and Paul, add to it.
Focus on the farmer instead of the farm. That's what you're saying, eh?
Yeah.
We can find tools for that to support the farmer skills. That would be, an interesting item. Jeff, you agree?
Yes.
Okay. Jeff, it's almost. Should we finish now, or?
Yeah, I think if there are not any more questions, we can stop it now. I recorded it, so it is. I will see if we can send it to you or the link if you want to look it again, or if we send it to people who could not be with us. I thank Jelle, Paul, and Abel for their input for this first webinar in R4D. And I can promise that there will be more webinars. We have a large team of experts. And so I thank all the persons who have been with us, and they will have invitations for further webinars in the next months. So thank you to everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for very interesting webinar. Thanks a lot.